And for more, let's cross to Washington. Daniel Hoffman, formerly with the CIA and a commentator on issues pertaining to intelligence, is with us. Daniel, I want to, before I toss to you, let me first of all thank you for joining us. Let me first show you this open mic incident that happened after Donald Trump's speech in the House chamber. The U.S. president speaking with a Republican lawmaker and saying he was 100% in favor of going public with a classified intelligence memo that reflects poorly on the FBI. Let's take a listen.
Let's release the memo. Oh, yeah. Oh, don't worry. 100%. Can you imagine that?
Yes, sir.
He'd be too angry.
How you doing?
How's it going?
Daniel, we had on the one hand Donald Trump talking about compromise, common ground with the Democrats, and then that open mic incident. Does that undermine the message?
I didn't quite pick up what was said on the open mic, regret to say, but what I can tell you is that just from the view of the Kremlin, I served in Russia for a number of years, and I have to tell you that I think Vladimir Putin and his team are probably popping open, vodka bottles in celebration. It's like they've infected us with a virus, the Russian virus, and it's causing a lot of paralysis in our government and partisan bickering, which really doesn't do us a whole lot of good. There are certainly lots of issues about this latest memo and the question of whether it includes sources and methods, which, of course, Russia would follow with great interest. But I think at the end of the day, what Vladimir Putin wants to do is to soil our democratic process, and the more partisan bickering he can cause, the better.
The memo has been described, and by the way, what Donald Trump is telling that Republican lawmaker is 100% he's going to go public with it. That memo basically deflects some of the blame for Russian meddling on the FBI for the way it handled the information more favorably during the campaign to the Democrats than to the Republicans. Should something like that be made public?
Again, I think, from my view, we in the United States have oversight of our intelligence, congressional oversight. There are House and Senate intelligence committees who are able to provide a good deal of look-see over our intelligence community and how we operate to ensure that we are operating in accordance with the law. And that's why we don't see a lot of transparency for the American public writ large. That said, there are times when we want to be transparent about things. And I think we'd like to be as transparent as possible about this Russia investigation since it's so out there in the news. I think our public is frankly clamoring for it. But again, the concern I would have as a retired intelligence officer is I wouldn't want to release information which reveals sources and methods that the Russians would exploit. So that would be my concern.
We had the current CIA director tell the BBC on Tuesday that, of course, the Russians are going to try to meddle in the midterm elections that are coming up later this year, but that the U.S. is strong and will take the necessary steps. Do you agree with Mike Pompeo?
Yeah, I don't think they've stopped trying to interfere in our political process. It's an ongoing effort on their part every day. We have some public information about this. There's a great website called Hamilton 68, which highlights Russian use of Twitter and their efforts to sow division in our country with Twitter posts. But I absolutely agree with Director Pompeo. Whether we're ready for the siege that the Russians are subjecting us to is another matter. I'm not so sure. I think we're still doing forensics on our social media and networking sites. I think we might take a good lesson from your country. Frankly, France did an excellent job during your election in not only exposing Russia's efforts to inject disinformation into your campaign, but then counteract it. And I think there's a lot of positive lessons learned with your experience, with the experience of the Dutch as well.
Daniel, when you talk about doing the forensics there, in the intelligence community, is there resentment towards the Russians, or is the resentment towards the big internet giants who have been slow to reveal the secret sauce of how their social medias work?
Well, I can tell you from just my own perspective, look, our social networking and media sites are really the modern day critical infrastructure backbone of our democracy. And I think we all recognize that, and I think that's why Vladimir Putin sought to use them as weapons to spread disinformation, but also to degrade our trust in them, because he knows with his own election approaching in March of 2018, he knows that his own protesters will use those networking sites to enable their own leaderless protests, and that's really what scares him. What scares Vladimir Putin is democracy, something our two nations know quite a bit about. So I think, we know the enemy. It's Vladimir Putin. It's not the Democrats or the Republicans or Twitter or Facebook or Google. It's the Kremlin.
And Daniel, one final question for you. When you think back to when you first started, do you think this new era of transparency we live in, where it's easy to leak stuff, is good or bad?
Oh, I think it's obviously of great concern. There are quite a number of mechanisms inside agencies within the intelligence community. If somebody's upset about something, there's inspectors general and opportunities for whistleblowers. There should be absolutely no reason for anyone to go outside the intelligence community and leak protected, classified, sensitive information that, certainly in the case of Edward Snowden, put our people at grave risk and put our country at grave risk. That's traitorous and shouldn't happen.